Hi, everyone. My name is Eric Kussin, and I'm the founder of an organization called the hashtag Same Here, SAMEHERE, Global Mental Health Movement. And I want to spend a couple minutes telling you a little bit about my story, some of the triggers that led me down a path, unfortunately, of something called PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and then talk to you a little bit about, asking for help and why asking for help just makes sense. So I worked in professional sports for 15 years. I worked at the NBA league office. I worked for a number of NBA teams. I worked for a number of NHL teams. And about 6 months into my time with the most recent team I was with, the Florida Panthers, my brain and my body hit a brick wall like you could not imagine. I just stopped functioning. Cognitively, I stopped functioning. Even physically, I stopped functioning. And I was in Florida at the time, but I went back to New York where my family was from, and I searched for all these ways that I can find a path towards health. And what I was given was essentially every type of medication possible. I tried over 50 different medications over a 2.5 year span while I laid in a bed staring at the ceiling, not watching TV, not listening to the radio, no interest in anything. My brain felt empty, is the best way I can describe it. And none of those drugs worked for me. Now, that's not me bashing on drugs. Everyone's got a different situation. But in my case, unfortunately, the medications did not work for me. So I was then told to do TMS therapy, transcranial magnetic stimulation, where they shoot electromagnetic waves into your brain. And I did that for 23 sessions, 23 days in a row, about 45 minutes per session. And unfortunately, on the 23rd night, I couldn't fall asleep. And the morning of the 24th, I remember looking at a bottle of pills on my counter. And the only thought running through my head was swallow that bottle, swallow that bottle, swallow that bottle. It was playing on repeat. That's what we call a suicidal thought, when our brain starts to develop these error messages. And I knew at the time I didn't want to swallow that bottle of pills, but it was this impulse and this urge to do so. And so I was fortunate enough to be around family, to be around some friends, and to ask for help. And I was taken to a psych ward, a mental hospital, and I was evaluated there. And I met with the attending psychiatrist. And what she told me was my last resort, because I had tried so many other things, was to do shock therapy, where they put electrodes on your brain under general anesthesia and try to shock your brain to essentially get the neurons firing once again. And so, being told that's your last resort, I listened to that advice. And over a 5 week period, inpatient at the psych ward, I had my brain shocked into seizure 12 different times. And unfortunately, after that 5 week period, I left the hospital feeling no better than I had the whole 2.5 years prior to that. So, by all intents and purposes, I thought my life was over because this doctor said that was my last resort. But I was fortunate enough that I met a woman a couple days after leaving the hospital who was an integrative psychologist. And so I sat down with her, and instead of all the other appointments that I had been to for the 2.5 years prior, where the doctors always asked, "What are your symptoms?" And when I gave my symptoms, they then said, "This is your disorder label. And then based on your disorder label, here's how we're going to treat you." And it was usually some form of medication. This woman just asked me what's gone on in my life. And I want you to listen very specifically to the things that I went through as a child, because I didn't realize that these things had impacted me the way they had. I had an older brother from the time I was 8 years old and he was 12, so he was 4 years older than me. He broke his femur bone, the largest bone in his body, in a sporting accident and was put in a body cast for a year and then homeschooled. Healed from that and was diagnosed with ALL, a children's form of leukemia. So 5 years of chemo and radiation in the late 1980s, but he went into what's called remission. His body didn't have the cancer in it anymore. A month later, he was in a Jeep, an open Jeep with an open top and an open back and no seatbelt. The car lost control and he flew out of the back, landed on his head, cracked his head open, lost partial vision in his eye, and was in ICU for a month. Healed from that, went to college and was diagnosed with a relapse of the same leukemia he had as a child. This time they had to give him a much stronger chemo regimen. And so the stronger chemo drugs, unfortunately, was doing a number on both of his cancer cells and the healthy cells in his body. And unfortunately, what that led to is his body breaking down into what's called septic shock. Septic shock led to a coma, and he was in a coma for 3 months where we didn't know if he'd wake or have any brain activity. But he did wake. He had his full cognitive faculties about him, and his kidneys failed then from the rigor of the septic shock. Needed to go on dialysis. And then we were all tested to see who's the closest match. My father was, donated a kidney to him. I then went to go work. I got my first job, great job working for the NBA league office. I'm all excited at this point. Childhood's behind me. And that year, 3 of my close friends between the ages of 22 and 23 each passed away, unfortunately and shockingly, of heart conditions. So why do I share that whole background? Because those things happened to me in my life between the ages of 8 and 23 years old. But my mental health crash happened to me when I was 35 years old. I wasn't able to make the connection in my mind that the difficult life experiences that we go through and we watch, they impact our mental health cumulatively. Stress and trauma builds in our central nervous system, just like plaque builds in our arteries for our physical health. That means that every single person on this planet, because we all experience difficult events in our lives, the loss of loved ones, the sickness of loved ones, the divorces, the breakups, the job losses, the bullying, the verbal abuse, the sexual abuse. There's so many things we all go through in our lives. Those things cause stress and trauma to our system, and they cumulatively build inside of us. Therefore, asking for help is not a sign of weakness. Asking for help is exactly what we should be doing. If you go to the gym and you get a personal trainer, or you get a trainer to show you how to use equipment, that is help. Just like what builds in our central nervous system and being able to release and rewire from that system is such a vital part of being a healthy individual and living. So no shame in it. Ask for help. We all have stories. It's different levels and different times in our life, but it's 5 and 5. We're all in this together. Again, hashtag same here.